Hi y'all, my name is Mr. Chao, and welcome to Chao Time. In this week's review, we're going to be looking at the Casio G-Shock Titanium Square. This watch was a limited edition, but it was unnumbered. It's on loan to me by one of my first subscribers and good friends. So thank you so much for letting me borrow this watch and reviewing it. How I review watches is by scoring them against a rubric. The rubric has a number of more objective categories and then a subjective category, and that gives us a total score. I then take that total score and I apply a value multiplier, which gives us a value score. The rubric and rankings for all the watches are available in the description if you would like to take a look. And there is a video in the upper right hand corner in case you'd like to see how this all works. After that, I give my completely subjective and biased opinion on the watch. And this is based on my experience, my emotional connection, anything really that has to do with how I perceive watches, and yeah, because that's how I think that we make our watch buying decisions anyway. So let's get to it. Before we can begin scoring the watch against the rubric, we first need to understand what is the purpose of the watch, why it exists, and what design language inspires it. Well, the watch is a durable and fashionable do-it-all watch. We'll start with the function, feel, and visual appeal of the case and bracelet. The case and bracelet are made of titanium, then finished with a DLC coating in a camo motif. There is a laser engraved texture that adds to the aesthetic. Other areas of the case have a polished or brushed finish. This type of coating is very tough and scratch resistant, but will eventually wear off over time if worn daily. The design of the case and bezel are basically unchanged since the Square debuted in 1983. The original design is now a classic, being copied and homaged by lesser brands. It's made for toughness with recessed buttons, but the buttons are a little difficult to operate if wearing gloves. It helps the durability, but hurts the usability. Some of the edges that make contact with the skin have bevels on them. A great ergonomic choice. Attached to the module is a sapphire crystal, which is relatively rare for G-Shock. It's completely flat and nestled into the bezel for protection as well. The bezel has the words protection and G-Shock deeply engraved into the titanium. The bracelet was a bit of a surprise for me in terms of quality and feel. There are several angles that are sharp to the touch. The tolerances are tight enough, and the amount of play between the links adds to the comfort perfectly. The links are short and articulate well, contributing to the comfort. The push-button clasp is signed and has 4 micro-adjust positions. All parts of the case and bracelet feel solid and sturdy, and seem to be able to last through many years of use. We can't move on without talking about the toughness of these cases. Internally, there are shock absorbers between the case and the digital movement that protects it from shocks and vibrations. Additionally, it's rated to 200 meters of water resistance, adding to the overall toughness and usability. 8 out of 10 for form, 7.5 out of 10 for function. Moving on to the dial. This dial was hard for me to score with the rubric criteria, as it was made for analog watches, but let's give it a try. There are several painted elements on a dark background. Some of the text is painted on top of another texture or pattern, making it difficult to read. Granted, some of it is just information that isn't needed to operate the watch, but it still feels cluttered and busy. I mean, does every function and design choice need to be printed on the dial? The negative dial does add to the overall aesthetic, but detracts from legibility in many conditions. I'll admit, the G-Shock in my personal collection also has a negative display, because it looks nice. but I learned my lesson from always having to twist the watch on the wrist at different angles to see the time. In other instances, I had to push the LED backlight to be able to see the screen. When using the light though, the text is very clearly visible. The light duration can be changed between 2 and 4 seconds, and can also be set to automatically illuminate with a good hard wrist roll. Of course, it works whenever you push the button, so it works well into the night. 6.5 out of 10 for form, 6 out of 10 for function. Let's move on to that digital movement. The movement in this watch is the module 3459. It is accurate to about a half second a day, but it has 2 different ways of keeping better time. First, there are 5 time calibration stations around the world that the watch can receive radio signals from to reset the time. Second, it can connect to your device via Bluetooth to sync the time as well. Some of the other functions include a world time, up to 5 alarms, an hourly chime, fully automatic calendar, stopwatch, countdown timer, and a reminder function. There are probably other functions as well that I've forgotten. Some of these functions can be controlled through the Bluetooth app, making it easier to set than having to navigate menus on a tiny LCD screen with 4 buttons. The battery will last for 10 months on a full charge and 22 months if left in a drawer with no light, as it has a battery saving mode. On the wrist with some sun exposure every day, it should work until the battery stops taking a charge. Visually, the module inside is nothing to look at though. 3 out of 10 for form, 9 out of 10 for function. That brings us to 40 out of 60 in our more subjective categories. So let's move on to our final and most subjective category, the brands, heritage, prestige, and visibility. Casio was founded in 1946, but didn't start making electronics until 1950, with Japan's first electronic calculator. They released their first wristwatch, though, in 1974. Aiding Seiko in the quartz crisis and putting digital watches on the wrists of the masses. There is a famous story of a Casio engineer, Kakuo Ibe, who dropped a pocket watch sentimentally important to him, which damaged the watch, thus coming up with the idea of the G-Shock. The G-Shock watches would have to have a battery life of 10 years, have water resistance of 10 bar, and survive a fall of 10 meters. And so he was responsible for the 1983 release of the first G-Shock, the DW5000, from which this watch evolved. G-Shocks have since become a cultural icon, possibly the most recognized and visible watch brand in the world, surpassing even the likes of Seiko and Rolex. The brand has a cult following, as well as being respected among enthusiasts. The only thing holding the score back is that the brand has little prestige. 7 out of 10 for heritage and prestige, bringing the total score to 47 out of 70. This watch was released as a limited edition run in 2019 and is no longer in production. It retailed for an eye-watering $1,700 USD, and finding one in new condition and cheaper is going to be extremely difficult. I see them on eBay selling between $1,700 and $2,000, and in some cases even more. I wouldn't be surprised if the prices don't ever come down much. I'll use $1,700, as you can find them in very good condition at that price if you're patient. That means the value multiplier will be 1.143 for this watch, and the value score is 53.72 out of 70. And so that brings me to my personal opinion on this watch. And first we'd have to start with that value score. This particular watch, being the limited edition $1,700 version, doesn't really work for me. It's a little bit too expensive for a G-Shock. But the less expensive production runs are $550 new, and you can find those a little bit cheaper on eBay. and those are a much better value proposition. There are some downgrades. They're not titanium, and I believe the crystal is mineral crystal. And so even though the total score would be a little bit lower and it would be slightly less desirable for me because I really love sapphire crystals, I do not like scratching mineral crystals. The value score would be much, much higher, which is important for me for a watch like this. Other than that, it's an incredibly functional watch. It's really, really comfortable. I was shocked by how well it sits on the wrist, how much I just love having it on. I think it looks nice. I really like everything about it. If I were to buy one, it would be one with a positive display. And I might just get one on the resin bezel and strap and buy one of those metal mods, and just do that modded work myself. I don't mind doing that to some watches. I wouldn't mod some watches, but other watches I would be happy to. And this is one of those that I can definitely see myself buying a regular resin, but still the solar and still the Bluetooth connectable one, and upgrading it over time. So, what do you think? Do you agree with my scoring? Is there anything about the rubric that you think could be changed? Are there any reviews or content that you would like to see me make? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for sticking it through to the end. Bye, y'all.